I'll keep it brief, Chair, because I'm sure you want to get into the substance of the matter by saying that you correctly point out there's an overlap between 2 financial years, and I suppose it'll give the committee an opportunity to see what progress has been made from one year to the other, to the extent that there's an overlap. But many of these issues are issues that you have been dealing with over time. So the explanations might sound familiar. So I'll come in later, Chair, if there's a need to do so. And let me hand over to, with your consent, the Chair of the Board, and he can then guide us through the presentation, or anyone else. Thank you.
Thanks, Minister. We're going to start with the, excuse me, the SIU presentation and on Proclamation 11 of 2018. Babumtibu will give a high-level presentation. As I'm saying, all presentations are taken as read, so the salient points will be dealt with, and members, if there's anything that you have not touched on, we'll come back to it in the Q&A sessions. Babumtibu, over to you and your team. Chairperson of the board, stand by. We'll come to you once we're done with the SIU.
No, thank you very much, Honorable Chair of SCOPA, Honorable members of SCOPA. I also acknowledge and greet the Minister, the Chair of the Board, members of the Board, GCEO of Transnet, and all that are in attendance. I'll go straight to the presentation, Honorable Chair. The slide on the outline, I'll skip over because we're going to go through each slide. About the SIU, of course, we include that just as a matter of background. The committee is well aware of the SIU powers and the skills that we possess to do our investigation. Slide number 6, just to spend a few minutes on that, is really the outcomes that we seek to reach as we investigate, and you're going to hear a number of those outcomes. There's been really a significant progress made on the civil litigation part. We'll touch on that. Those officials that have been involved in all of the irregularities and maladministration, they've also been referred and acted upon. There's a number of referrals, and we're working with NPA on the referrals to NPA. There's also referrals to other regulatory authorities, and you'll see a slide specifically around blacklisting of the companies that are involved. I will then go to slide number 8, where we now really introduce the investigation. My colleague, Ms. Pretorius, will do the investigation progress. But just as a matter of background, and I'll go through this quickly, the SIU was mandated, as you said, Chair. Oh, switch off. The SIU was mandated, as you indicated, Chair, by Proclamation number 11 of 2018. It was published in a gazette dated 6 April 2018 to investigate various categories of irregularities and maladministration within the affairs of Transnet. That would also cover any incidents of corruption. The proclamation has been extended on 2 occasions up to now, and that has been occasioned by the fact that when there are matters that were reported and sought to be investigated and they are not covered by the original proclamation, we then seek an amendment. We adopted a phased approach in this investigation due to the significant volume and complexity of the matters to be investigated. This presentation today, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, will outline, as I indicated, significant progress and the results on the matters that were investigated in Phase 1 and Phase 2. And management is well aware of the progress that we have made. So, as the SIU, we've already concluded investigations into about 8 matters, which we will point out in the investigations that are related to the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into state capture. We've always said that as part of ensuring that as government we implement the recommendations of the State Capture Commission, we will look at various instances of investigation in all the state institutions, in particular state-owned entities, and this is one but that example, and we will point that out in the investigation presentation. This presentation also sets out the focus areas and matters that have been allocated into the later phase of phase 3, which we are pleased to report that is already under investigation, and already 2 matters are in the civil court, the details of which we've included in this presentation. I will pause here, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, and hand over to my colleague with the caveat that the Chair has given that the presentation has been read. Thanks.
Morning, everybody. Chair, honourable members, Minister, all protocols observed. Thank you for the introduction to our head. So we will deal now with phase 1 and phase 2 investigations. This is a list of the focus areas. I'm not going to go into each and every one, given that it has already been read, and would rather spend time on the substance of each of the matters. I have denoted in red with an asterisk those matters which relate to the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into state capture. And then it's easy to reflect which, in fact, are involved and where we have made progress. The phase 2 matters, we also have 3 matters here that are linked to the state capture investigations, and we'll go into the detail of all of those a bit deeper into the presentation. Further matters that were in phase 2 that related to the KZN province, also listed there, 2 of which relate to state capture and are denoted as such. Slide number 14 is a summary of our key outcomes, which just gives a snapshot of where we are with all the investigations at Transnet. We have 7 civil matters before court, 6 of which are in the tribunal and 1 in the High Court. The value of the contracts that are before court, not necessarily the recoveries, but the contract values are 56.9 billion. Actual cash recoveries, money in the bank that has been secured for Transnet, is 113 million, and that number is busy increasing as we speak. Value of contracts that have been set aside, we have already succeeded in 1 court order where 26 million rand was ordered to be repaid, involving a Transnet executive and a supplier. We have referred 14 disciplinary referrals, 92 criminal referrals, various administrative referrals for SARS relating to tax issues and irregularities, blacklisting recommendations and CIDB contraventions, and we've submitted 1 interim report to the Presidency. The next table is a table of each civil litigation matter with all of the details of the date, when it was launched, which court it is in, and the quantum. I'm not going to go into detail in each and every one, save to point out that this first one relating to Mr. Msagala, who's an ex-executive of Transnet, where the SIU successfully froze the pension and assets and received a positive order in the special tribunal where 26 million rand was ordered to be repaid by the parties that had been taken to court by the SIU and by Transnet. The 1064 locomotive procurement, which we are all very familiar with, again, the value there is related to the value of the contract, not necessarily the just and equitable that is being sought to be recovered. The civil litigation is ongoing. The SIU and Transnet are together in court in this review application. And there was also a preservation order, but there are settlement agreements, 2 of which have been signed. A 3rd one is close to conclusion, and the SIU is working closely with Transnet in respect of those. The reconstruction, deepening and lengthening of the Durban container terminal berths. Here we are in the special tribunal as well with a review application to set aside the contract and for just and equitable relief. The SIU has also launched a preservation application, and this litigation is ongoing in the special tribunal. Civil litigation in respect of Transnet properties. This is one of the phase 3 matters where significant progress has been made. We are in the special tribunal here in respect of Transnet officials as well as a company that supplied Transnet. SIU and Transnet are litigating together here, and the main review application is underway. The Neotel, now trading as Liquitel, the CCTV cameras contract, we have launched our application in the special tribunal with Transnet there, asking for those contracts to be set aside and for just and equitable relief there as well. Another properties matter in respect of the Lenele long-term lease. The matter was previously brought to court by Transnet, where they brought self-review proceedings, and the SIU has since applied to join in those proceedings. That matter is in the High Court and is a 498 million rand lease over a 30-year period. The next table is a table of all the disciplinary referrals, and this is worth noting here, as well as the significant progress that has been made in terms of acting on SIU's referrals and recommendations. The first matter is Mr. Msagala, Group Executive of Transnet Capital Projects. The referral was done in March of 2020, and in July of 2020 he was dismissed. Mr. Chauke, also charged with misconduct. He was found not guilty but has since left Transnet's employment. Mr. Mashamba, a senior manager, was referred in June of 22 and dismissed in August of 23. And then Mr. N, whose disciplinary is still proceeding, so we've not disclosed his name, is in progress. Mr. Sizwe Shlom, misconduct, dereliction of duty. We referred in March 22 and he was dismissed in August of 22. And then there are 9 disciplinaries that we've had referred where the SIU identified through our forensic data analysis process officials who are doing business with Transnet and have failed to declare their business interest and have failed to obtain the requisite approvals from within Transnet. 9 such referrals have been done, and these are all in process. Transnet has consulted with our team, and they are busy evaluating the evidence to take action on those matters. Then blacklisting, which is a matter that is vitally important. This is the list of the entities and individuals where SIU has made recommendations for blacklisting. The green on the right indicates that all of these blacklisting matters are in the process of being dealt with by Transnet, and steps have been taken in order to action the SIU's recommendation. There's a second table on slide 25, again listing all the entities involved. And then the matters that are pending administrative action are on slide 26, where Transnet is in the process of getting going with these ones. Going into the detail of each of the investigations, the 1064 locomotives, the 4 OEMs are listed there. They are all now trading with new names. In our first civil matter there, we have already got into court, and that matter is pending. And as I said, there are settlement agreements that are also underway, so good progress has been made there, and we hope to be able to report in more detail on those quite soon. Slide 29. Here there is a settlement discussion. As I mentioned, the settlement discussions are ready. Those are the 2 that have been signed with Wabtec and Alstrom. And there's a third one pending. And the SIU will still proceed with Transnet to have these contracts set aside in the High Court as they remain irregular. And the parties will present the settlement agreements to court to be the proposed just and equitable remedy. And that is an important point to note, as we will talk a lot about settlement agreements going forward here. We also have noted the civil recovery that was made, where Transnet received a 618 million rand repayment from CRRC, which was a refund for a material and reliability support agreement. Moving on to the transactional advisories, McKinsey, Regiments and Trillion, we concluded our investigations there. Transnet was quick out of the blocks with these investigations and have already proceeded to court on their own prior to the SIU's investigation getting going. And they have launched civil applications and litigation in respect of the officials that have been listed there, as well as entities, and these matters are pending in the High Court. There are also other outcomes to be noted there. McKinsey made a settlement of 870 million rand, which was paid to Transnet. Regiments, there was a settlement agreement concluded as well for 180 million rand. However, Nothing has been paid as yet in terms of that settlement agreement, and the SIU is reviewing that settlement agreement as well. Unfortunately, now Regiments is also in liquidation, in final liquidation, and Trillion is also in the process of going into liquidation, which frustrates our civil recoveries. In respect of Nedbank and the interest rate swaps, also denoted as a state capture-related matter, our investigation is concluded and our ongoing support is being provided in terms of referrals that the SIU has done as a result of the investigation. The SIU and Transnet together have completed our court papers to bring a review application in the special tribunal to review and set aside the irregular interest rate swap transactions. Transnet and Nedbank are in the final stages of mediation in an attempt to reach a settlement over these irregular interest rate swap transactions. The SIU has referred evidence to various regulatory bodies where further action is required. The Ekwembu matter, I won't go into detail here. The matter was brought by a whistleblower and the contract has since been terminated. There were no findings of irregularities there, though. Moving on to slide, Inspector of the Conflicts of Interest. Again here, this is the matter where the SIU does a forensic data analysis comparing the employee database with the SIPSI database and the payments database to determine where officials have businesses, and those businesses have done business with Transnet and have been paid with Transnet. We identified quite a lot of red flags, but the nub of it is that 9 disciplinaries thus far have been presented to Transnet, where officials failed to declare their business interest, and that business conducted business with Transnet while they were employed there, and they did not have the required authority to do so. Transnet's already engaged with our investigators and is commencing with consequence management. There are 14 more such disciplinaries being prepared to be handed over. And the SIU, importantly, has made systemic recommendations to Transnet to improve policies and governance in respect of this area with the declaration of business interests and the obtaining of permission by officials to conduct such business. The Neotel contract, which Neotel is now trading as Liquid Telecoms. In respect of this matter, the investigation is completed and we have launched our review application in the special tribunal with Transnet for the CCTV cameras, which were meant to go to the ports for 834 million rand. The AFU is championing settlement discussions, and the SIU and Transnet are involved therein, and we have agreed to stay the review application for a very specific period to allow space for these discussions to take place. The SIU has referred evidence against 43 individuals and companies listed there, pointing towards criminal conduct. The SAP investigation, also state capture-related matter. We've appointed a senior counsel here, but a very recent development is that there are now settlement discussions on the table being led by the NPA, and Transnet and SIU are participating therein. Other outcomes are a criminal referral, as well as the SIU working with the Securities and Exchange Commission investigators from the American DOJ in respect of their investigations into SAP. Cutting Edge, investigations done. We're appointing senior counsel to set aside the contract, and we did an NPA referral against 9 entities and officials in November. T-Systems, this is nearing conclusion. Another company that is frustrating civil recoveries as they are no longer in South Africa, and our legal team is considering the avenues that are available to us for a successful civil litigation and or recovery in this matter. GSS, slide 39, this investigation is concluded. We are also appointing senior counsel through the State Attorney's Office to set aside the contract. There's a disciplinary that is pending against the Acting Chief Procurement Officer, which Transnet has started the process. It's not yet concluded. And the second official involved resigned prior to his disciplinary being referred. Moving on to KZN matters, the Durban container terminal berths, as mentioned in the earlier civil slides, we are already in court in this matter. Other outcomes are a criminal referral to the NPA, CIDB referrals, as well as 12 blacklisting referrals, the details of which appeared in the earlier slides with progress made thereon. NMPP, allegations here involving corruption in respect of a senior Transnet official, Mr. Msagala. The investigation is completed and we're in the civil litigation phase. There are significant civil outcomes here. The SIU approached the tribunal in order to secure a preservation order, which we did in July of 2020 to freeze various assets of Mr. Msagala to the value of approximately 14 million. And we then brought our main application with Transnet, which was launched in August of 2020. We successfully secured a court order to recover 26.4 million rand from the parties in August of 21. The order is in the process of being executed. Already we had secured about 14 million rands worth of assets belonging to Mr. Msagala, comprising properties, luxury vehicles, and his pension. This has already been forfeited to the state, so it's just the balance between the 26 and the 14 that is being recovered. We also made NPA referrals and are working very closely with the NPA in respect of pursuing this prosecution. The disciplinary, the SIU handed over the evidence pointing to the disciplinary on slide 42 in respect of Mr. Msagala, the group executive, and he was dismissed. So we referred in March 2020, and in July 2020 he was dismissed. So there was swift action in taking the consequence management to conclusion there. Other referrals included a blacklisting, a SARS referral, informing Transnet of their obligations in terms of Section 34 of PRECA, and also blacklisting referrals to the Engineering Council of South Africa. This is just a timeline depicting the story of Mr. Msagala. The 24th of March, we made the disciplinary referral. On the 25th, the criminal referral is made. In July, the application is launched to preserve the assets of Msagala. August, we institute the main application. And on the 31st of August 2021, just a year later, we're successful with an order in the special tribunal to recover those monies lost. We then move to the cranes from Liebherr, also a state capture related matter. Investigation is concluded here. Liebherr offered to make a repayment to Transnet for a portion of the contract, which has been done. And the settlement was signed on the 31st of December. Again, SIU is always involved in settlement agreements and work closely with Transnet in this regard. The cash recovery was 54 million rand and has been paid to Transnet, and that was for the agency fee that was paid. Further engagements are underway in respect of a supplier development aspect of the contract. And again, as part of the settlement agreement, the parties will pursue the setting aside of these contracts in the special tribunal and have the settlement made a just and equitable order of court. The pipelines investigation, I'm not going to go into that. It was concluded and there were 2 referrals done there. We then move to phase 3, and these are the matters that are currently under investigations. It's important to note as well that we receive a lot of referrals from Transnet directly, and all of these matters listed here, 1 to 6, have come as a direct referral from the Transnet board requesting SIU's intervention. Apologies. It is noteworthy that matters 2 to 5, where the leases are involved, the SIU requires an amendment to our proclamation because it does not specifically cover leases. It's not a procurement event. That proclamation has been drafted and submitted to DOJ and DPE for support and further approvals. In the interim, we are empowered to investigate the conflicts of interest and the corruption, which we have done, and we detail the findings a little bit later on. Further phase 3 matters that relate to state capture are the ones listed there: Hatchgaboro, CPI, TNA Media, and the Manganese Expansion Project. These matters are being assessed by the SIU for the prospects of civil recoveries. Whilst the Zondo recommendations are mainly in respect of law enforcement and for criminal investigations and prosecutions, the SIU is still combing through the matters to determine if there are any civil recoveries that can be made in this regard. Further state capture matters, the Nkonki matter, our investigation is underway and progressing well there, and it looks like there will be outcomes. The delinquent director applications, we're on slide 48. This is an initiative being driven by the DPE. Transnet and SIU are supporting this with a view of having the former directors of the Transnet board declared delinquent. So we are providing the necessary support and assistance in order to bring that about. 2 other matters, the GNS Abalonzi contract and the legal fees that were paid for Mr. Gama to attorneys are not covered by our proclamation, and we have submitted already an application for a new proclamation to cover that. Several of the state capture matters are not listed on these slides because we have dealt with them in phase 1 and phase 2. So this then concludes and covers all state capture matters related to Transnet. Additional phase 3 matters that we are looking at that have come to the SIU's attention are in respect of Transnet Freight Rail. Here we are focusing on the allegations pertaining to ghost trains, emergency procurement and serious maladministration within Transnet Freight Rail. Transnet Port Terminals, here we are focusing on allegations of corruption, serious maladministration in relation to Saldanha Tipler project and the Richards Bay Port Terminal. Some of the outcomes in phase 3 that we are pleased to be able to share with you in terms of Transnet properties. Investigations are ongoing into conflicts of interest and the corruption there. We're working closely with law enforcement where we have made criminal referrals already. We've got a couple of outcomes here that we're pleased to be able to share with you. And there are 3 civil matters here that are in court already. The first one, on slide 50, is a preservation order. Now, this is a different matter to Msagala matter. There's another preservation order also in respect of luxury properties and pensions of 2 Transnet officials. In July of 2020, we went to the special tribunal, and in August we got our interim preservation order and froze assets of former Transnet officials, being Mr. Labelo and Mr. Mashamba's pensions, as well as their luxury properties in Rosebank and Danefern. The second matter that is in court in relation to these officials and the contract that they were involved in awarding irregularly is to Superfecta to the value of 156 million. Transnet and SIU are in the special tribunal and are litigating to have that contract set aside. The third matter in relation to Transnet properties is in respect of the Lenele review application. Here, the SIU uncovered evidence of corrupt payments between the Transnet lessor and Transnet executives who have since been dismissed, the same 2 executives mentioned earlier. It's a 30-year lease worth 498 million rand, and this is one of the critical leases because it's in the Durban port. Transnet had already taken the lease agreement to the High Court to review. The SIU's evidence pointing towards corruption significantly will bolster this case, and so SIU has applied to the High Court to join Transnet as a co-litigant in the Lenele matter. And as I said, this will certainly strengthen their hand in this review application. Disciplinary referrals have been made in respect of Mr. Mashamba, property manager, in June of 2020, and he was dismissed in August of 2020. Again, swift action. 2022, yeah. Sorry, I'll change it. And then Mr. Shlom, the regional manager, we did a referral in March of 2022, and he was dismissed in August of 2023. Then the last referrals there were SARS referrals, as well as a criminal referral pointing towards corruption by the Transnet executives. And again, we're working very closely with the Specialized Commercial Crime Unit and the ID to fast-track prosecutions in this matter. The last slide is the National State of Disaster Procurement. This investigation was done under Proclamation R23 of 2022, which dealt with all the COVID procurement. Here, this matter was referred to the SIU by Transnet as well. Our investigation is being concluded. Our evidence assisted in Transnet receiving a cash recovery from insurance to the value of 37.6 million, which has been recovered and paid. We also recovered laundered funds from an attorney's trust account to the value of R1 million. And the SIU is proceeding with the review application in the special tribunal and anticipate that our papers will be launched within this week. We've made NPA referrals for corruption, money laundering against 15 individuals and 8 entities. The 2 Transnet officials who were involved in this and who inflated the prices and received the gratification were dismissed and were disciplined and dismissed by Transnet already, and SARS referrals were made as well in respect of this. And that is our feedback. Apologies for the high speed, but I was aware of time constraints. Thank you.
All right, no, thank you very much. Advocate Mtiri, any conclusions?
No, thank you. Thank you, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. That's our presentation. But just to underscore one of the perennial issues that we continue to face as we investigate and make referrals to those officials who resign in the face of disciplinary action, as we always state, that even though they can terminate employer-employee relationship, we will continue to pursue them civilly when we submit civil litigation to recover. We will also cite them as parties for the damage that they would have caused to Transnet. They will not escape that. And of course, when we work with NPA referrals, they will also not escape criminal pursuit. Thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Tibi and your team just hang 10, where questions will come in the one session of the question and answer session, so you still stay there. Right. May we go to Transnet, please? I think this will affect a seating reshuffle here in front, so Transnet can have access to and see. We're going to dive straight into the performance section of the presentation, because I think that's the one which is material to 21, 22. And I know that the sections that you had delineated to the CFO, she will then come in and make an executive summary of those sections, but performance is the one. But let's start off with the board. Any introductory remarks on their part, and then we will come to the CEO. To the board, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair, Honorable Minister, and
having a throwback,
and the honorable members. I am no longer the chair of the board of Transnet. Chair, there is a new chair, and he has asked me to tender his apology and asked me to be part of the delegation today. Unfortunately, I seem to be the only non-executive director here, but I ask for the apologies. I do think that they are apologies from the new directors, because they are new on the board, and the schedule caught them at the time when they had commitments that they could not change, being professionals serving on a range of other institutions, boards. We're gonna start off with the group CEO opening, and then should be followed by the executive directors to the extent necessary, in respect of the aspects that need to be covered. And we would like just to be very focused on these matters. And I'm pleased that the SIU has lucidly presented what we have dealt with regarding the recoveries and consequence management in respect of all the matters that damaged Transnet historically. With your permission, Chair, I'm going to ask the GCE, Ms. Portia Darby, to speak. May I suggest that we don't go, we are a huge group, we can't introduce everybody. Whoever is called upon to speak may introduce themselves at that time. Thank you, Chair.
No, that's fine. Just one confirmation that's required. You are still a board member, right?
Yes, I'm still
because if in the absence of that would not have proceeded, in the absence of board representation. All right, that being the case, CEO, over to you.
Good morning, Honourable Minister, Honourable Chair, and Honourable Members. Chair, we will go to the section that you requested. Viola, just can you go to the performance, please? To the performance overview. Chair, first of all, the other board members, just to indicate, they are on teams if they are required. Thought you wanted me to go a little bit further than this, than starting on this slide, which was the context. Yeah, can you go forward? Yeah, maybe just go back, just one down, up, please. Yes, and I think this, Chair, I'll just try and summarize up. A lot of what's been presented by the SIU will relate to a lot of the cases, the long-standing legal matters that we have been dealing with, which were resolved in the 21-22 financial year. So I think we should be able to proceed from that. Chair, as we did indicate when we were doing this presentation last year, is that a large driver of the profit at the time was the revaluation of the TFR of the TP Transnet Properties asset portfolio, and that would have affected most of the divisions in Transnet, and in particular the investment portfolio. Can you move down? I'll also indicate where we've now at, because we did worry a little bit about this issue that we are overlaying two periods, both last year and now. We've just made the results. It would be difficult to ignore what's been said already. So when we look at the 21-22 financial year, where we came to an end of it, achieved quite significant improvements following on the COVID period on movement of manganese. Auto capacity was also up, with all of the challenges that we had at the time, as well as the ore corridor, because the challenges have not changed. The issues which were around locos, infrastructure investment and security incidents have not gone away particularly. So in that year, one of the issues that we were looking at is what opportunities are there for private sector participation to help us fund growth in particular, so that we would be able to continue using our internally generated resources to deal with two fundamental matters. One, the debt pile that we've had, as well as the second issue is to look at sustaining capex so that we could continue to run the operations, and then obviously the operations. On Transnet Engineering, thankfully, even till now, if you look at it, we've been doing a lot better in terms of cross-border revenue. In fact, we've even achieved better results in the last financial year. We've been looking at opportunities of supplying some rolling stock even into the mining industry in the last financial year. Also, the overhaul of rolling stock remains a priority, and had started having discussions with other state-owned companies to see what's the possibility of collaborating with them. Can we go to the next slide, please? In the case of TNPA, for the longest time, one of the big issues that we had here was our inability to deliver on the CapEx program on time. And to just move in terms of building infrastructure. By now, one of the big issues that we've done, and you would have seen this in the media basically, is the several tenders that we've been able to advertise. In that financial year, a lot of the time was going into the design work, the RFIs that needed to go out in certain instances, and RFPs in others. When you look at port terminals, I have to say the area that we've done particularly well at is in these autos space, and we continue to do very well on autos at the port terminals. Agriport, which is in Durban on Maiden Wharf, which was always a little bit of a laggard in the last financial year, actually started to do much better, and thanks really to the great team that work on that side. We continue, and an area that we started to look at in this area was, if you recall, there was the ranking outcome on the ports, South African ports, and we were looking at how we might be able to fast track or leapfrog in our rankings. And the two issues that we required, I suppose, two issues really that we required was, did we have modern operational practices at container terminals, number one, and number two, needed quite a lot of cash to invest in port equipment. Unfortunately, historically, as a result of the view that there would be a privatization, and this is over years on the strategy, there had been a significant underinvestment in port equipment throughout Transnet, throughout the port system actually. And in fact, even at TNPA, when you look at on the marine services, the fleet that we have. Can you go to the next slide, please? And then Transnet properties, with the recovery from COVID, we were able to see an improvement in the litres of fuel that we were able to move on the NMPP, and have been able to actually then, which were the opportunities we were looking at the time, was LNG, both at Richards Bay as well as in Ngqura. And TPL has participated and actually is participating in the bidding for the terminal operator in in Richards Bay, and that's already closed, and we are waiting to see what the outcome will be. In the case of Ngquga, unfortunately, that project is moving a lot slower due to a range of issues related to how the structure of the partnership. And then coming to Transnet Properties, Chair, a big exercise for us was to look at the valuation of the assets. Now, Transnet Properties was historically just a cost center inside Transnet and not a separate operating division. At this point, we created it as a separate operating division, number one. Number two, we were consolidating all of the investment properties under Transnet Properties with PPE, plant, property and equipment remaining inside the operating divisions. That led to the significant revaluation last year. I have to say, Chair, some of the benefits of that, and we were always clear that the benefit that we were aiming for is that when we got to a point of actively using that portfolio, we would be in a position to get a fair value for all of the property assets that we have. If we can just briefly go through the following slides, and then I'll hand over to Nonkululeko. This is the ESG outcome. We remain quite focused on ensuring that our impact on the environment is a positive one, and our stewardship is one that is a building and a partnering stewardship with our communities as well. In the last financial year, the carbon footprint has gone down, but unfortunately in this period, we would know with the inability to really increase the volumes that move from road to rail, we've not really been able to make a significant dent in the reduction of that. Total Transnet staff at the front, yes, I know that you would have seen the 50,000. That excludes contract employees. This 55,000 includes the contract employees. We continue to focus on enterprise development. ESD spend was 67 million rand, and if you look at the investment, which is on the, before I go to the next page, just one of the areas that we focused on rebuilding was the Transnet Academy. We collected all of the schools under one umbrella and created the academy so that we would have focused investment and focused attention. Thankfully, we've started to see quite good spin-offs out of partnering with some of the FETs as well in this area. We remain a level 2 BE contributor as Transnet. Can you go to the next slide, please? On supplier development and our contribution, a significant chunk, we spent about 12.5 billion on black-owned enterprises. Of this, 7.4 was female-owned businesses, and black youth was 1.8 billion rand spent. Pillar Pepper continues to be our premier foundation project, which CSI project that we remain committed to. In the last, in 21-22, you may be aware that we had also created a train, which is the Transvaco, from which we were able to carry the vaccines at the required temperature. Chair, just next slide, please, which is the last issue which in the last year was in 21-22 we were still grappling with, was this issue tied to fuel theft, where fuel theft leads to spillages and has environmentally impacts. The team has had, in the last period, has done significant improvements in this area, because actually even the amounts that we needed to set aside for the rehabilitation, we've been able to whittle down and work systematically to reducing the allocations and also to reducing the number of sites that we have open as a result of spillages. Chair, I'll hand over to Nonkululeko to go through the financials. Thank you.
Honourable Chairperson, Honourable members of the Scopa Committee, Honourable Minister, board members and colleagues, good morning. In terms of the financial year 2021-2022, just in terms of the summary of the performance that we reported, it was revenue that had grown to 68.5 billion by 1.8%. We also had net operating expenses reducing by 5.9%, reported at 45 billion rands, and an improvement in the earnings before interest, tax and depreciation, as well as amortization, an improvement of about 20.5%. And again, this was at the back of it being a COVID year in 2021 and us moving to 2022 financial year. In that financial year, we reported a net profit after tax of 5 billion, coming from a loss position of 8.7 billion in the 2021 financial year. We spent in capital expenditure requirements for the business 13.2 billion. It was a reduction compared to the prior year of 16.8%. In terms of the cash that we generated from the operations, it was an increase of 18.1%, 29 billion rands in total. Chair, the gearing had also improved to 45.5%, which is an indication of the room and ability to continue working with capital markets in the funding requirements of Transnet. We reported cash interest cover at 2.6%. It's one of the critical covenants that we have with our lenders. Portia has touched already on the training and other requirements, including the BBBEE matters. I'll go to the next slide. In the 2022 financial year, therefore, Chairperson, some of the strides were reporting an unmodified or an unqualified audit opinion, where we had spent 4 financial years before that with a qualified audit opinion. The significant driver of this unqualified audit opinion, we had not had any challenges with regards to reporting in terms of international financial reporting standards. The qualification for the 4 years before was driven by the challenges in relation to the reporting of irregular and fruitless and wasteful expenditure, which was generally reported as incomplete and largely driven by the fact that it needed us to look at matters dating back to 2011 and cumulatively ensure that that number was accurate. We then worked with the National Treasury to request an exemption so that we were given space and time to basically try and strengthen the control environment and the systems, and therefore we were allowed to remove a particular note in the financial statements and put it in the integrated report, which then allowed the financial statements to purely be on the basis of international financial reporting standards, and therefore that was unqualified. Chair, we are still in that exemption period, which started at 31st March 2022 until the end of 2024. In 2025 reporting, we will then have that note back in the financial statements, having done the work that we needed to do under the exemption. In the financial year as well, we had no breach of any significant covenants. We had a bond maturity, Chair, that was a $1 billion that was maturing in that year in July. It had been raised 10 years before. We needed to ensure that was dealt with, and there was no default, and we closed that out. One other challenge we had been dealing with, I think, for the 3 years before that, was the release of the results very late in the period, September, October. And in the financial year 2022, we managed to close the processes within the PFMA timelines. We released the results in July. Portia has also touched, Chair, on the investment property, which is a very huge portfolio that we have that needed some work done, and we had to review the whole portfolio, and I'll just share some numbers that come from the impact of that review. On the next slide, though, Chair, we highlighted as well as we were releasing the results that we were still dealing with the challenge around the availability of locomotives, which we were indicating that it needed resolution in order to ensure that the performance of Transnet further improves. The security challenges, theft and vandalism, are also impacting us quite significantly, and they were an issue we raised in the year. We were attacked through cyber, Chair, in July 2021, which resulted in our business having to come to a standstill for a few days, and it's a matter that needed focus and continues to. As well as in March, as it was just after that year end, we had the KZN floods in April of 2022, which was the start of the new year we are in. But there had been very significant weather conditions that would impact our rail track and in fact result in impact in the movement of goods. Even in the year we had one, I think around November 2021, that was quite significant. On the environmental incidents and that resulting in us having to put through significant provisions in the financial statements, this was also largely impacting our Transnet pipelines business, where we would have significant theft of fuel along the line, and we would then have to spend on correcting the environmental impact of the challenges from that theft. And then, Chairperson, we also just highlight that and it's work that we needed to continue dealing with the supply chain management reforms, which are part of a significant piece of work within this exemption period that we have from the National Treasury with regards to the disclosure of irregular, fruitless and wasteful expenditure. Chair, I'll go very fast then on the next few slides, which are the detailed financial numbers, and I've mentioned some of the significant numbers. The next slide just gives you the financial performance in the income statement, but I've touched on all the numbers. And then the next slide, being the balance sheet or the financial position, also gives you a highlight of some of the significant numbers that we reported in the financial statements of 2022. The next slide is giving you, Chair, operational challenges that would have impacted the rail volumes, and I touched on the issue of theft and vandalism in the earlier slide, as well as availability of locomotives. What we then saw in that financial year was a reduction in the volumes that we were able to move by 5.6% between 2021 and 2022 financial year, where we moved only 173.1 million tons compared to having moved 183.3 million tons the year before. But from the port containers as well as petroleum through the TPL business, we did see some growth. As a result, Chair, on the right-hand side, we just give the committee an indication of how much each of the Transnet 6 divisions are contributing to the revenue that Transnet would report, and the rail business being the most significant, that contributed 47%. The next slide, Chair, is just a summary of our operating expenditure. We have put in programs to try and ensure that we're as efficient as possible in our expenditure through ensuring that when we put budget, we drive zero-based budgeting approach, as well as containing cost as much as possible. And as a result, we saw a reduction in expenditure from 47.8 billion the year before to 45 billion the year 2022. In terms of the makeup of our operating expenditure, the personnel costs make up 58%, and followed by about 17% of many others, but maybe individually the electricity costs are the second largest at 10%, and then we've got fuel at 8%, as well as material and maintenance. On the next slide, Chairperson, we just give you a sense of how we moved from a profit of a loss of 8.7 billion in the year 2021 to 5 billion profit. And in the year, there was an improvement in revenue and a reduction in expenditure, but the most significant element that we put through the numbers was when we revalued the investment property. We had to get external experts to review the whole portfolio and visit all the properties. And what then came out as a result was that there was a significant undervaluation of these investments, and it was driven by the fact that, Chair, we were also coming from the COVID year the year before, and also some of the valuations had not been done over a period of a long time, and as a result, then we had to put through this adjustment into the books, which then gives a very fair reflection of what you should ask for if you were to sell any of the properties that were revalued. In terms of the next slide, just to show the cash flows, Chairperson, we continue to work with capital markets in raising money. We operate the business of Transnet through cash that we get from operations, but also we borrow money from the capital markets. So we raised in that year about 19.9 billion. But largely what we raised was critical for us to ensure that the funding that was maturing in that year was dealt with, and therefore it was largely for refinancing. Hence, in the next picture, Chair, you do see that we had to repay close to 20 billion of what was maturing in the year. The Moody's and S&P are our rating agencies. On the next slide, Chair, we show the committee our maturity profile. So we have a total debt of just close to 120 billion. In the year 2022, the most significant matter we needed to deal with is the bar that shows in July. That was the $1 billion that was maturing in July 2022. What we then had to do, Chair, is in order to make sure that the maturity is dealt with, we worked with a group of banking institutions to help us raise the money. And we have successfully, just forward-looking, raised $1 billion through the international bond markets to basically make sure that that whole bond is refinanced in the current period, and therefore we dealt with that maturity requirement. On the next slide, Chairperson, in terms of the capital investments, in the year that was, we spent 13.2 billion. A significant portion of it went to the rail business. 76% of it was to assist in the requirements of the rail business, both for infrastructure as well as the rolling stock. And then this next slide is to give the committee just a bit of more detail in terms of this investment property valuation that we highlighted earlier. So in the year 2021, our investment property portfolio across the business of Transnet was valued at 16.5 billion rands. After we then did the detailed work with the external valuers and experts, we realized about 9.8 billion as the value that had not been recognized, which increased the value of our investment property to 29 billion rands, which is recorded then in our balance sheet as at the end of 2022. So, Chairperson, that is the last slide with regards to the 2022 financial year. And to your comment earlier, we have included a few slides that would talk to 2023, but I would take your guidance if you would want us to give some salient points in that regard.
I think it's best you do, because it would be pointless to look at this in a vacuum, because you've moved from a profit to a loss. And so that material change makes a fundamental difference in terms of our outlook. So please cover those points.
Thank you, Chairperson. Now, moving further to the new financial year that we closed, Chair, last week. Again, we start with some performance highlights, and we've continued to receive an unmodified audit opinion for the second year. And it was quite critical that Transnet prepares its financial statements on going concern basis, because if it had to be a different approach, it would be a huge consideration. And having the board having reviewed Transnet's financial statements and the auditors as well, there was comfort that Transnet is still a going concern entity. In the year, because of the floods in April, we received from the National Treasury an injection of 5.8 billion rands. A portion of that, Chair, was to assist us to deal with the impact of the KZN floods. In total, Transnet was impacted to the value of over 5 billion rands because of the floods. And the National Treasury then assisted with 2.9 billion, and we carried the rest of the costs through our insurance and other funding from within the business. The other 2.9 billion in the 5.8 that is at number 3 was to assist with the renewal of the rolling stock because we've highlighted the challenge that the availability of locomotives is quite a significant challenge. So we received 5.8 billion, 2.9 was for the floods in KZN, and another 2.9 was to assist with the rolling stock challenges. I've already highlighted, Chair, the work to close out the maturity, and in raising that maturity, or rather in dealing with that maturity, we went to the international markets to try and raise $1 billion. We were quite surprised, pleasantly so, because it was 3 times subscribed in a very difficult global economic period that we had to go and be in the markets. So our gearing has improved. We reported 45.5% last year, and this year it is at 43.6%. We also had been working on recovering some of the long outstanding debtors, and in the current year, we managed to recover close to 2 billion that had been outstanding for quite a significant amount of time. Chairperson, in the year, which is the second year of the 3 years that we've been given as an exemption, we have seen a reduction in the irregular expenditure that we have reported. There is still irregular expenditure, but compared to the previous year, there is a reduction, and it's an indication of some of the work that has been done to strengthen the control environment. When we successfully issued the $1 billion, we had been working very closely with the rating agencies, and as soon as that issuance was closed out, Moody's reviewed our outlook from being negative to being stable at that point in time. And S&P affirmed our rating as they had it. The next slide, Chair, you will see very much similarities to the slide that I showed for the 2022 financial year, because the issues that continued to challenge Transnet in the new year was the availability of locomotives. Security challenges that relate to theft and vandalism have continued, and as a result, we've seen derailments continuing with regards to our trains. But also the impact of the KZN floods, because it happened in April, has actually impacted this New Year's results. Also in October, we had to deal with about 11 days of strike action when we were dealing with salary negotiations. However, it assisted in the closeout of the process. We managed to get a 3-year deal with our labor colleagues, and therefore for the next 3 years, we have no concerns around issues of wage negotiations. We also have to deal with the high level of repayment obligations with relation to our debt that is maturing. In the current year, Chair, we also had a breach of one of the lender covenants, which is the cash interest cover, which was largely driven by the fact that from the